The sun had just peeked over the green hills when the village roosters began to crow. It was a quiet morning, the kind that made even the wind whisper softly through the tall grass. In a small wooden house near the edge of the forest sat a young man named Tom, the miller's youngest son. The air inside was still. Dust floated in the sunlight coming through the window. On the table lay an old hat, a broken tool, and a letter from his late father. Tom's hands trembled as he read it again. It was the will that divided the family's belongings. His oldest brother got the mill, the middle one got the donkey, and Tom, he got a cat. Just a cat. He sighed, running his fingers through his messy brown hair. A cat can't grind wheat or carry sacks, he muttered. What am I supposed to do now? From the corner of the room came a soft meow. The cat, small, gray, with bright green eyes, tilted his head as if he understood every word. Tom smiled sadly. Well, at least I have company. But as he turned away, something strange happened. The cat stretched his legs, stood upright on 2 feet, and began brushing the dust off his fur. Tom froze. Good morning, master, said the cat in a smooth, confident voice. Tom's eyes widened. Why, you can talk. The cat gave a polite bow, his tail flicking behind him. Indeed, I can. And I can do much more, if you'll trust me. Tom could only stare. Trust a cat? The cat grinned. Not just any cat. I am Puss in Boots. Though, I'll be needing a fine pair of boots first. Tom laughed nervously. You want boots? For what? Adventure, of course, said the cat proudly. You'll see soon enough. With no one else to believe in, Tom found himself nodding. He gave Puss a small sack and a pair of worn leather boots that once belonged to his father. The cat pulled them on, tightened the straps, and stood tall. His reflection in the window looked almost heroic, the cat with shiny boots and a clever sparkle in his eyes. Now, said Puss, leave everything to me. Before Tom could stop him, the cat slung the sack over his shoulder and marched out the door, walking gracefully on 2 legs, like a nobleman heading to town. Tom rushed to the window, watching in disbelief as Puss disappeared down the road, the morning mist curling around him. What is he doing? Tom whispered. The day passed slowly. Tom waited and waited, his stomach growling with hunger. The sun was beginning to set when he heard soft footsteps. Puss returned, his boots dusty but his eyes shining with excitement. In his paw, he held up a plump rabbit, tied neatly with a ribbon. Look, master. A gift fit for a king. For a king? Tom repeated, confused. Yes, said Puss proudly. I told the royal guards that this was a gift from my noble master, the Marquis of Carabas. Tom's mouth fell open. Marquis of what? It sounds grand, doesn't it? Puss said with a wink. Before Tom could argue, Puss was off again, this time heading toward the castle gates, his red feather dancing in the wind. At the royal palace, the guards gasped as the strange cat arrived, bowing low before them. A gift from the noble Marquis of Carabas, my master, Puss announced. The king, curious about such a polite and talking cat, accepted the rabbit with a smile. Tell your master he has my thanks, said the king warmly. When Puss returned to Tom that night, the stars sparkled above them. It went perfectly, he said proudly, removing his hat. The king now knows your name, and soon, the whole kingdom will too. Tom shook his head in amazement. You're either the smartest cat in the world, or the strangest. Puss smiled. Both, perhaps. As the fire crackled softly, Tom felt a spark of hope in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, his life was about to change. And somewhere deep in the forest, under the silver moonlight, Puss in Boots whispered to himself, this is only the beginning. The next morning, the sky was golden and calm. Birds sang above the green fields, and the village buzzed with life. But inside the tiny barn at the edge of the woods, Tom was pacing nervously. Puss sat by the fire, polishing his shiny leather boots with great care. His red feather gleamed in the sunlight as he hummed softly to himself. Tom finally spoke. You never told me what your plan is. What are we even doing? Puss grinned. Making you rich, of course. But not just rich, respected, admired, and known by all as the Marquis of Carabas. Tom sighed. But that's just a name you made up. Exactly, said Puss, and sometimes, my dear master, a clever name is the first step to a clever life. He winked, then picked up his sack again. Today, we shall go hunting for gifts. Tom frowned. More gifts? For the king? Of course, said Puss. Kings love gifts. It makes them remember your name. Without another word, the clever cat disappeared into the forest once more. His boots made soft thuds on the dirt road as he walked with purpose. Inside the woods, Puss laid out his plan carefully. He sprinkled fresh grain near a bush, hid behind a log, and waited quietly. Soon, a pair of fat partridges came hopping along. Quick as lightning, Puss pulled the sack shut. Perfect, he purred. The king will love these. Later that day, Puss marched up to the palace gates again. The guards smiled, for they remembered him from yesterday. A gift, he said proudly, from my noble master, the Marquis of Carabas. The king was delighted. Ah, such fine birds. Your master must be a most generous man. Puss bowed low. Indeed, your majesty. He wishes only to honor you. As Puss left the castle, he caught sight of a beautiful carriage near the garden. Inside sat Princess Liana, the king's daughter. She had kind eyes and golden hair that shimmered in the sun. She spotted Puss and smiled. Is that a cat in boots? Puss tipped his hat politely. At your service, princess. The princess giggled. How wonderful. Do come again. Puss bowed once more. I surely will, your highness. When he returned home, Tom was waiting anxiously. Well, he asked. What happened? Puss dropped the empty sack and smiled wide. Everything went perfectly. The king is pleased, and the princess is curious about you. Me? Tom gasped. Of course, said Puss proudly. You are the Marquis of Carabas. It's time the world knows it. Tom looked doubtful, but deep inside, a small spark of hope began to glow. Maybe, just maybe, this clever cat could really change his life. As night fell, the stars twinkled above the quiet forest. Puss sat by the fire again, sharpening his claws and whispering to himself, tomorrow, the real fun begins. And with that, the clever cat's plan began to unfold, one that would take them from a poor barn to the royal palace itself. The morning sun sparkled over the green hills, and the birds sang cheerfully as if the whole world was waking up to something special. But inside the little barn, Puss in Boots was already wide awake, pacing back and forth with excitement. Today was the day his plan would truly begin. Tom sat on a hay bale, yawning. Puss, what are you thinking about so early? The cat turned sharply, his tail flicking. Today, master, the king and princess will be taking a ride through the countryside. And we are going to meet them, by surprise. Tom blinked. Meet the king? But we can't. We're poor, Anne. Puss raised a paw. No time for fear. Just do exactly as I say. He handed Tom some old clothes and pointed toward the river. Take these off and step into the water. What? Why? Tom asked, confused. Because, said Puss with a mischievous grin, you, my dear master, are about to become a royal hero in need of rescue. Before Tom could argue, Puss had already run ahead. He hid behind the tall grass and waited, his sharp ears twitching. Moments later, the sound of horse hooves and carriage wheels echoed down the road. The golden carriage of the king rolled gracefully along the path, its banners fluttering in the warm breeze. Inside, the king smiled beside Princess Liana, who was admiring the fields of flowers outside. Just as the carriage passed the riverbank, Puss leapt out, waving his paws wildly. Help! Help! My noble master, the Marquis of Carabas, is drowning. The guards stopped at once. What's going on? Cried the king. Puss bowed deeply. Your Majesty. My master was bathing in the river when thieves stole his clothes and ran away. The king gasped. Oh dear. Guards, hurry, fetch him some royal clothes. The guards rushed to help Tom out of the water. He was shivering and red with embarrassment, but when they handed him a fine velvet coat and golden belt, he looked quite noble indeed. The princess leaned out of the carriage window, her eyes widening. Oh. So you're the Marquis of Carabas, she said with a smile. Tom blushed. I suppose I am. The king chuckled warmly. Come, young man. Join us for a ride. You can't walk home in wet clothes. Puss bowed low again. Your Majesty is most kind. And so, the plan worked perfectly. Tom, now dressed like a nobleman, climbed into the royal carriage beside the princess. Puss trotted proudly beside them, tail high, pretending to be nothing more than a loyal servant. As the carriage rolled through the countryside, Puss's golden eyes sparkled. Everything was going exactly as he planned. But he wasn't done yet. Up ahead lay wide fields and tall towers, all belonging to a greedy, fearsome ogre who ruled with cruelty and pride. Puss's whiskers twitched. If my master is to truly become noble, he whispered, that ogre's castle will soon be ours. And with that thought, the clever cat dashed ahead through the fields, ready to face his next big challenge. The golden carriage rolled gently through the countryside as Puss in Boots trotted proudly beside it, his feathered hat swaying in the breeze. Behind him sat Tom, now dressed in royal clothes, looking every bit like a nobleman. The king and princess smiled, enjoying his kind manners and gentle voice. But while they talked and laughed, Puss's sharp mind was already racing ahead. He knew the next step of his plan, and it was the most dangerous one yet. Up ahead, on the top of a rocky hill, stood a dark, towering castle. Its windows glowed faintly red, and thick vines crept up its walls. The air around it felt strange and heavy, as if the clouds themselves avoided that place. That, whispered Puss to himself, is the home of the ogre. The ogre was the richest creature in all the land. He owned all the fields, all the forests, and all the rivers that the royal carriage would soon pass. And if the king asked who those lands belonged to, Puss wanted only one answer, the Marquis of Carabas. Puss tightened his boots and flicked his tail. Time to make a new friend, he said slyly. The castle doors loomed tall and black as iron. Puss knocked confidently, tap, tap, tap. A loud rumbling voice thundered from inside. Who dares disturb my meal? Puss straightened his hat and called out, a humble traveler, your greatness. I've heard tales of your amazing powers and wished to see them for myself. The massive doors creaked open. There stood the ogre, taller than two men, with green skin, sharp teeth, and eyes like burning coals. He wore a fur cloak and carried a bone the size of a tree branch. You have courage, little cat, growled the ogre. Few dare to visit me. Ah, said Puss, bowing politely, I only wish to meet the one who can do the impossible. I heard you can change your shape into any creature you like. The ogre smirked proudly. Indeed, I can. Watch this. With a great roar, he spun around, and in a flash of red smoke, turned into a lion. His mane burst like fire, and his claws scratched deep lines in the floor. Puss jumped back, pretending to be terrified. Incredible. So powerful, so mighty, he exclaimed. But I bet you can't turn into something small. Surely a lion so great could never become a mouse? The ogre's eyes narrowed. A mouse. Ha! That's too easy. Another puff of smoke, and there, where the giant had stood, was now a tiny squeaking mouse, running across the floor. That was exactly what Puss had been waiting for. Got you, he shouted, and with one swift pounce, Puss caught the mouse under his paw. The little creature squeaked in fear. Puss grinned. You should have stayed big, my friend. With a flick of his paw, he tossed the mouse out the window, and just like that, the greedy ogre was gone forever. Puss dusted his boots and looked around the grand hall. The castle glittered with gold and jewels. The tables were filled with food, the walls lined with paintings, and the floors sparkled like glass. He smiled proudly. Well, I suppose this castle now belongs to the Marquis of Carabas. He hurried outside, climbed the castle gate, and called to the servants in the yard. The ogre is gone. From now on, this castle belongs to my noble master. The servants cheered, for they had feared the ogre for years. Down the hill, the king's carriage was approaching. Puss quickly ran to the road and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, he called. Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas. My master has been expecting you. The king's eyes widened. What a beautiful place, he said. Your master must be a great man indeed. Tom's mouth fell open in amazement. He had never seen this castle before in his life. But when he looked at Puss, the clever cat gave a quick wink, and Tom understood. The king and princess stepped out of the carriage to explore the grand hall, dazzled by the beauty around them. Puss followed behind, tail high, proud and satisfied. His plan had worked perfectly. As the sun began to set behind the hills, painting the castle walls gold and pink, Puss stood on the balcony, looking down at the lands that once belonged to the ogre. He smiled softly. From a poor barn to a royal castle, he whispered. Not bad for a cat in boots. But deep inside, he knew their adventure was not over yet. The greatest surprise was still to come. The grand castle of the late ogre now glittered like a palace in the sunlight. Its tall towers shone with gold, its gates were lined with flags, and the air smelled of sweetbread and blooming roses. The king's royal carriage rolled through the gates, and Puss in Boots stood proudly at the entrance, tail high, hat in paw, bowing deeply. Welcome, your majesty, to the castle of my noble master, the Marquis of Carabas, he announced in his most elegant voice. The king's eyes widened. Magnificent, he said, stepping down from the carriage. I've never seen a castle so grand. Princess Liana clapped her hands with delight. It's beautiful. Look, father, the gardens have fountains and roses. Tom stood beside Puss, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe what was happening. Only 2 days ago, he was poor, hungry, and hopeless. Now, he was standing in front of the king and princess, dressed like a nobleman, with a castle that even the royal family admired. He whispered nervously, Puss, this isn't really mine. Puss turned, his golden eyes gleaming. It is now, master. Just smile and be gracious. Tom took a deep breath and bowed politely to the king. Your Majesty, I am honored by your visit. The king smiled warmly. The honor is ours, Marquis. I must say, your lands are as impressive as your manners. Inside the grand dining hall, golden candles flickered. The long table was filled with roasted meats, fruits, and pies, all left behind by the ogre's servants, who were now cheerfully serving their new master. Puss guided everyone to their seats. He hopped onto a small chair at the side of the table, brushed his whiskers, and grinned proudly. Everything was going perfectly. As music filled the hall, the princess turned to Tom with a curious smile. Tell me, Marquis, how did you come to own such a beautiful castle? Tom froze for a moment. Then he glanced at Puss, who nodded slightly. Well, said Tom, smiling shyly, I suppose I had a bit of help. Puss chuckled softly. A good master deserves good fortune, your highness. The princess laughed. And clever friends, too, it seems. As they dined, the king listened to Puss's polite conversation and Tom's humble words. He was impressed. This young man was kind, respectful, and seemed truly noble at heart. When the feast ended, the king stood and raised his cup. To the Marquis of Carabas, he said grandly, and to the clever cat who serves him. Everyone cheered. Puss bowed deeply, his feathered hat brushing the floor. But as the celebration continued, Puss quietly slipped away to the balcony. The moonlight shimmered over the castle towers, and the stars blinked softly in the night sky. For a moment, the clever cat's expression softened. He gazed at the horizon where the old mill once stood, where his master had been poor and forgotten. He whispered, You're free now, master. You'll never go hungry again. Just then, the princess stepped out onto the balcony, her golden dress glowing in the moonlight. She looked thoughtful. "Sir Puss," she said kindly, "your master seems like a good man. But tell me honestly, was he always a marquis?" Puss tilted his head and smiled mysteriously. "He has always had a noble heart, princess. Sometimes, it only takes a little magic and a clever cat for the world to notice." The princess laughed softly, her eyes warm. "Then you're not just clever, Puss, you're wise." She turned back toward the feast, and Puss gazed at her thoughtfully. In his heart, he made a quiet wish, not for gold or glory, but for his master's true happiness. As the night grew deep, the king and princess prepared to stay the night at the castle. The hall glowed with light and laughter, and for the first time in his life, Tom felt proud. He looked at Puss across the room, the little cat sitting tall and confident beside the king, and smiled. Everything had changed because of him. Outside, the wind carried the soft sound of music through the moonlit fields. The castle that once belonged to a greedy ogre was now filled with joy and kindness. But Puss in Boots knew the story wasn't over yet. He still had one final wish, a future where his master's heart would find not just wealth, but love. Sparkling heart. The castle slept under a silver moon. The grand hall, once loud with laughter and music, was now quiet except for the soft flicker of candlelight. In his new royal chamber, Tom lay awake. His soft velvet bed was warm, yet his heart was restless. He turned toward the window and stared at the stars above the dark forest. "Everything happened so fast," he whispered. "I was poor, and now I live in a castle. But is it really mine? Or just a dream?" Down in the courtyard, Puss in Boots was sitting on the garden wall, gazing at the same stars. His tail swayed slowly as he thought. "He's not used to all this," the clever cat murmured. "Gold and glory can fill a house, but not always a heart." Just then, soft footsteps echoed behind him. He turned to see Princess Liana wrapped in a silken shawl, her golden hair shining in the moonlight. "Oh. I didn't mean to startle you, Sir Puss," she said gently. Puss bowed politely. "Your Highness could never startle me. Cats have good ears, you know." The princess smiled and sat beside him on the stone wall. "You must be proud of your master. He's kind, humble, and quite unlike the nobles I've met before." Puss nodded. "He is different, princess. When I met him, he had nothing, not even hope. But his heart was good. That's why I helped him." She looked at Puss with wonder. "You must care for him deeply." "I do," said Puss softly. "He's not rich because of tricks or lies. He's rich because he's learned to believe in himself." The princess looked down at the gardens below, where fireflies danced above the roses. "I think I can see that in his eyes," she whispered. The next morning, sunlight poured into the castle windows. Birds sang, and bells rang in the distance. The king and princess joined Tom for breakfast in the bright dining hall. Puss sat proudly by the window, his tail curling around his boots. The king smiled warmly. "Marquis, your castle is truly splendid. And I must say, your manners and grace have impressed me deeply." Tom bowed humbly. "Your Majesty, I'm honored." The princess looked at him, her eyes kind and curious. "Marquis," she said softly, "do you miss your old life? Before all this?" Tom paused. His heart felt heavy for a moment. "Sometimes," he said truthfully. "But I think, it wasn't the gold or castle that changed me. It was Puss. He taught me to see what I could be, not what I was." The princess smiled. "Then he gave you the greatest gift of all." Puss grinned proudly. "Ah, wisdom from a princess. My work here is almost done." Everyone laughed, but inside, Puss felt something deeper. He could see how the princess looked at his master, not with pity, but with admiration. And Tom, though nervous, seemed happier each time she spoke to him. The king noticed too. He whispered to Puss, "Your master seems to have made quite an impression on my daughter." Puss winked. "My master has a good heart, your Majesty." And hearts recognize each other. The king chuckled. Indeed they do. As the day went on, the princess and Tom walked through the castle gardens. The air smelled of jasmine and honey. They talked about simple things, the village, the forest, the stars. When they reached the fountain, the princess said quietly, "Marquis, I don't think titles or gold make a person noble. I think kindness does." Tom looked into her eyes and smiled softly. "Then I suppose you see me for who I really am." She nodded. "Yes. And I like what I see." In that gentle moment, the clever cat watched from behind a rose bush, smiling to himself.
Ah,
He whispered, "It seems love has found its way faster than I planned." The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in soft pink and orange. The castle glowed like gold, and for the first time, everything felt right, not just for Tom, but for the clever cat who had made it all happen. But deep down, Puss knew there was one final thing left to do. A secret plan that would seal his master's destiny forever. The next morning, the castle was alive with joy. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, and golden trumpets played cheerful tunes across the royal courtyard. Servants hurried about with flowers, ribbons, and banners, for today, the king was hosting a grand feast in honor of the brave Marquis of Carabas. Tom, dressed in a shining blue coat trimmed with silver, stood beside Puss in Boots, who looked as proud as ever. "Everything you see, master," said Puss, smiling, "is the reward for your courage and kindness. But remember, the greatest treasures are not made of gold." Tom nodded, his eyes warm with gratitude. "And the greatest friend," he said softly, "wears boots and a feathered hat." Puss chuckled, flicking his tail.
ah,
"Flattery. It will get you everywhere." As the grand feast began, the king raised his jeweled goblet and spoke, his voice echoing through the marble hall. "Marquis of Carabas," he said, "your bravery and honor have impressed me beyond words. You saved my life, cared for my people, and earned my daughter's respect. I would be proud to call you my son." The hall went silent. Tom's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, I don't know what to say." The Princess Liana smiled softly. "Say yes," she whispered, her cheeks glowing like roses. Tom turned to her, his heart full. "Then yes, Your Majesty. With all my heart." Cheers filled the hall. Bells rang across the kingdom. The king clasped Tom's hand and placed it in the princess's. "May your heart stay honest, your home stay warm, and your friend in boots never leave your side." Later, as the moon rose over the quiet castle, Puss in Boots walked alone through the gardens. The air was cool and sweet, and the stars sparkled above him like tiny diamonds. He stopped by the fountain and looked at his reflection, a clever cat in tall leather boots, a feathered hat tipped just right, and eyes full of stories. A soft voice came from behind him. "Are you leaving, Puss?" It was Tom, dressed now in a simple cloak, the same kind he wore when he was poor. He smiled sadly. "You don't have to go. This is your home too." Puss shook his head gently. "No, master. My work here is done. You have everything you need, courage, love, and a place where you belong." Tom knelt down and hugged him tightly. "I'll never forget you." Puss purred softly. "And I'll never stop watching over you. Who knows? Maybe one day, you'll need a clever cat again." Tom laughed through his tears. "Then I'll leave a pair of boots by the door." Puss winked. "That's my boy." With that, the clever cat turned and walked toward the forest. His boots made soft taps against the stone path, fading into the night. Fireflies lit his way, and the moon shone like silver above him. As he disappeared among the trees, his voice echoed faintly through the breeze. "Where there's courage and kindness, magic will always follow." And so, the story of Puss in Boots came to a beautiful end. A tale of friendship, bravery, and dreams that came true.